Hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well and that you're all having an absolutely incredible day. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. The last year or so has had myself, lightly confused nearly at all times within the cryptocurrency space because we are constantly bombarded with a large amount of news within this sphere as we are all in this space together, if you will. A lot of times I find that the news becomes insanely popular. So if there is news that comes out, sometimes it gets swept under the rug. Sometimes people don't care about it. And I mean like wildly significant things. You've been there before. We don't have to go over it. That I think will be market changing. But alas, no one tends to pay it any mind. And then there are other times when we get news and it's like, oh, well, no one will care about this one. And it ends up making extremely popular news that day or even for the course of a couple of weeks. The problem is that in the last year or two, whether it be new people to the space and therefore there's like a huge 30 to 40% of the market who simply does not know about these things, and or that there could be a lot of new people who are writing these articles on cryptocurrency websites who also got the job without any prior knowledge of the crypto space. That's not me making a mean joke. It just seems to be the only logical answer that I could find in a world where news gets presented as something brand new and also like, whoa, can you believe that this is happening? When at the same time, it has happened multiple times before. Just thought I'd give you like a little preface before we dive into it, because this news was presented as this is the first time that we're ever really hearing about something like this, and therefore it has to be extremely significant because no one has ever heard of this news before. Not that it's not significant, but we'll get there together. The Wall Street Journal has recently posted an article revealing that the U.S. government actually owns Bitcoin. This is one, significant. Two, also something that we've known for a very long time. And I think when people hear this kind of news often, it might actually elicit some type of response in them where they go, what? The U.S. government is also holding. Perhaps I didn't make myself clear over the course of the last couple of years. If you've been here for more than 30 videos, I'll give it a clean 30. You've definitely heard me saying this over and over. When we talk about the significance of the cryptocurrency market and where we currently are as a community, if you will, is dramatically different than when I first entered the cryptocurrency market. The idea of any company, a company holding Bitcoin was something like a dream that was, 20, 30 years down the line. How do we convince a company to buy and hold Bitcoin? This is when we had, what was it? Oh gosh, that one company that sold socks. I don't remember. Stocks. Anyway, announced that they were going to be allowing people to buy stuff with Bitcoin. The market went completely insane. Upon the news that we would one day have a country holding and mining Bitcoin, this also seemed like, well, see you guys in 40 years. It'll take a very long time for us to get there. And now we have over a dozen countries that we actively know about, many of them under US dollar sanctions, and therefore they have chosen Bitcoin as a way to transact between them. You can look it up. We've gone over it on this channel before. So a lot of times, I myself, when presenting news, will mention that we have dozens of companies, dozens of countries who are holding Bitcoin, who are mining Bitcoin, who are getting deeper into the cryptocurrency space, who are allowing their banks to hold it, etc., etc. It's a gigantic wave that continuously rushes over us. And this is usually one of my annoyances within the cryptocurrency space, that we can get rumors about something and Bitcoin's price will rise by 15%. But on actual news, like significance of as far as like, oh, we now live in a world, in a future where governments are actively trying to get as much Bitcoin as they can because they're expecting the price to go to $1 million per coin, just like everyone else. And then Bitcoin ends up going down on that day. It's kind of like one of those things. So I don't know if this is new news for a lot of people that governments are holding Bitcoin, or the fact that the US government has also been holding it for like roughly around a decade at this point. I'm not sure if that changes something in you knowing this news. The other significant part is that the amount of Bitcoin that the US government now has is worth over $5 billion. That's another gigantic thing there. It says this significant cryptocurrency fortune has been obtained as a result of the government's operations to prevent what they call cybercrimes and illegal online activities. Back in the olden days, that is to say like 2012, 13, 14, remember when everything that anyone did with Bitcoin was just simply deemed illegal? This is terrible, this is illegal, this is awful, why is anyone using it, yada, 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 that kind of thing. Any website that was using Bitcoin eventually got shut down. Then there were other websites that were places where you could purchase things of a certain nature. And as all these websites began to get shut down, the people who actually took the coins was basically the US government, and they've been holding on to a lot of them. They sold a lot of them years ago as well. This is how it wasn't Novogratz, it was the other guy. The other guy with the face, the guy with the Michael Saylor. Did I get it? Oh, snaps. Yeah, I think it's Michael Saylor, who also used to go to these auctions that the U.S. government had years ago. They're not as frequent anymore, and this is how their amount of Bitcoin has ballooned to billions of dollars. The large amount of Bitcoin under the control of the U.S. government is the result of a series of high-profile operations against cybercrime, yada, yada. An important example can be seen in the seizure of a significant amount of Bitcoin by the Department of Justice as a result of an operation targeting Bitfinex that lasted for about 6 years. There's also the road many years ago that was made of silk. It says that's 2013. That's insane to think about that. That's actually been over a decade at this point. So yes, many governments over the last years, and if the news of the U.S. government doing this barely sticks in people's minds, that is to say, you now have evidence and news of that the U.S. government is actively holding Bitcoin, billions of dollars worth. Other countries have been doing the same. Upon seeing around 2013, 14, 15, that the U.S. government was taking a large amount of Bitcoin and or stashing and hoarding it, a number of other countries began to announce operations as well. We've had some of the news here from time to time. As there's some country, some regulator who's like, we want to help the people, when it's actually always just about money. They've also done seizures and other things like that before from other people in the cryptocurrency space who had a lot of Bitcoin, and now other countries are also holding massive amounts as well. However, this news was thrown out there as something that no one ever knew about. There's even like this photo is a little cringe for those of you not looking at the screen. It's a Bitcoin with its hand on its hips, very celebratory. There's a whole bunch of hands reaching to the sky and the US flag, as if this is like, something to be celebrated, when all that Bitcoin was actually stolen from a number of people on different platforms who have allegations that they must have done something illegal to be able to have that much Bitcoin in the first place. So yeah, if it interests you at any point, you can definitely find articles from years ago. There's an article on the screen right now from 2019. It is from Investopedia. It says how the U.S. government handles its massive stash of Bitcoins, 25th of June, 2019. They've had Bitcoin for a while and will continue to have more Bitcoin, especially as the price goes up and they find other ways to say that other people have done something illegal and or something wrong. So, yeah, one of the last point, and then we'll move on. One of the really interesting points years ago when I got into crypto was that governments would nearly do everything they could to not buy or hold Bitcoin. It was, meant to be anti-Bitcoin, and therefore governments did not want it. And then around the time when we figured out that governments were getting into it, the narrative changed a little bit into this kind of, well, yeah, they're buying because they know that it's going to replace them kind of thing. So if at any point in the far future, Bitcoin does end up overtaking the US dollar in some sort of way, well, guess what? The US government will not flounder, because at that point they would have trillions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and they'd simply start transacting in Satoshis. Like I say, little side thought, but people in the cryptocurrency space keep assuming that it's only them within the space, that it's only me, you, your brother, your cousin who's kind of into it. No, like Bitcoin has won. That is WON. Like, we have won this is why we have such hype and power and momentum around the idea of a Bitcoin ETF and other people getting into the market, because we have already won. There's a reason why everyone is so interested in this space, because everyone in some sort of way, in their own way, sees that crypto is the future. It's just a matter of people within the cryptocurrency space also realizing this, because the big money's here. It's been here for a while, and they are actively making sure that they buy up all the cryptocurrencies so that you can't have any. That is not a tinfoil hat. That is just how finance works. It's the same thing with stocks. It's the same thing with land. It's the same thing with real estate. That's the U.S. government holds a massive amount of Bitcoin, and that's just what we know about. That's just from their raids from the DOJ. Who's to say that they're also not mining in the background? We don't know what the U.S. government is doing. Yeah, that's the U.S. government owns Bitcoin news. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Also in, I guess, significant news, but I feel like this is more of a diversion. This is personally just me. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision of the Bank for International Settlements, or the BIS, has released a consultation paper proposing to make it compulsory for banks to disclose their cryptocurrency exposure. We now live in a world where banks actively are holding large amounts of Bitcoin. We know this. The problem, and I say this in a gigantic question mark, because I don't know if this is actually a problem for the banks and or the BIS, in that banks are probably holding large amounts of Bitcoin behind the scenes. We got into this discussion before where people were telling me on Twitter that there was no way that BlackRock or Fidelity or Bank of America or any other bank was holding Bitcoin. Why, they said? Because they said there were no SEC filings for BlackRock, for all these other companies and banks going through the SEC saying that they held Bitcoin, similar to what MicroStrategy does. So MicroStrategy buys up huge swaths of Bitcoin. You've seen the news before. We just bought 14,000 more Bitcoin. Yay, amazing. And then they have a filing with the SEC. You have to understand that they're a company who's trying to be as compliant as possible. When you hear news from 2013, 2015 of these companies and these banks who have shell companies, you must remember these reports. These were major reports that were released less than a decade ago, if not a decade. You can Google them and find them. They're real things. And people who had shell companies, and people who had companies within companies, and people who had subsidiaries within their companies, and they were allegedly hiding money in Seychelles. They were hiding it in the Bahamas, you name it, any kind of tax haven. And then people, you must remember this, where people found out that like Shakira and Michael Jordan and all these other people allegedly had, billions of dollars hidden in these places to like basically escape being taxed. Now, when you hear that celebrities are doing this, when you hear that the other people who have money are doing the exact same thing, you must sit there and ponder, how would they know that that's a thing? If you've ever or seen a documentary or been in contact with, I don't know how people are living their lives. They're like wealth management agencies, and these people will consult you on what you can and should not do with your money. That is to say, last year you made $47 million, and they go, okay, well, we can write this off. We can write that off. Did you do this? Did you do X, Y, and Z? We can write this off as well. This is the portion that you can declare, and we would suggest that you actually create a brand new company and simply have the money flowing through that. This new company, there are also states within the United States that also have really weird tax loopholes. If you decide to go through with this, please get a tax advisor and don't just listen to me on YouTube. But there are a number of places where you can create a company. It can kind of like have not a backwards loop, I forgot what it's called, and people end up paying less taxes in this sort of way. So the point to be made is that if you know that celebrities and normal rich people can do these things, it is safe to assume that the information is coming from a bank and or an advisor who works at a bank. And therefore, the bank already has this kind of information. The bank already knows how to create other companies and or subsidiaries that have no actual location. If you've ever watched a documentary on how like the banking system actually works, or how like people create new companies that don't have an actual location, sometimes you'll see that an investigator of some sort from CNBC or whoever's making the documentary type thing, they'll go around and they have those shots of them like being on a plane, and they're like, we're here to investigate. They get off the plane, they go to an address. It's like called 115 Cherry Bank something or other lane. They go to this place. There's one person sitting at a desk, and they go, is this so-and-so? And the person goes, I don't know. I've been paid to sit here all day. And they find out that there are 70 different companies from this one building that's completely empty. So we can safely assume that if people are doing this, that banks would also know as well. And like the point that I'm trying to make as well is that a lot of times when it comes to finance, and a lot of people who are new to the financial world, whether it be the crypto world and or the traditional financial world, a lot of it they look at is simply on the surface. So they'll see that there aren't any filings from BlackRock with the SEC about owning Bitcoin. When you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you have an unforeseen amount of power that allows you to be able to walk around taxes and find loopholes and other things like that. When you have hundreds of billions of dollars, you're in another realm completely when it comes to what you can and can't do with your money and how much money you can make over the course of a day. This is why a lot of times some of you might have seen, I've had this conversation with friends before, if you can Google it, type in how much money does Jeff Bezos make an hour, and you'll see the amount of money he makes is astronomical because he is worth billions of dollars. When you talk about a company like BlackRock, who has assets around, I think it's $11 trillion, you're playing basketball by yourself. Like there's no one else on that level with you. So we can only assume that they know methods that would completely boggle our minds to be able to make sure that they could create 65 other companies, drop of a dime, drop of a hat, as quick as they wanted to around the world, that also would have subsidiaries within them that could be owned and have a CEO that is from South Korea, managed by someone who is from South Africa, have a completely different names called Water Time, that is buying Bitcoin and or mining Bitcoin through other subsidiaries beneath them. It's not simply just transparent and on the surface. If everything in finance was transparent, we would not have financial crashes, because we would be able, me and you, would be able to see in real time how much money the bank has. And we would go, okay, something's wrong. Let me pull my money out. That's, So dragging it on back, we got a little bit off course there. The news is that the BIS is trying to mandate that banks in general will have to begin to disclose how much crypto that they have. This is interesting for a number of reasons, because this means that behind the scenes, there are a number of banks. They're not doing this for us. Understand that the BIS is not making sure that other banks are transparent about the amount of crypto that they have, because they want to make a fair and leveled playing field for us so that we can know who's in the market. It has to do with the amount of exposure, because banks believe that you should only have a certain amount of exposure to different types of asset classes. So a 2% exposure, a 5% exposure, a 4% exposure to this, a 15% exposure to real estate, 3% to bonds, categorically across the entire line. So if they find out that there are other banks behind the scenes who may have a higher risk category than they should of exposure to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, which might amount to 15 to 20% of their portfolio, the bank doesn't care if one day Bitcoin's price goes up to 300,000 and the bank makes tons of money. It's about the aftermath of the price actually falling down and then that affecting other banks. It also has to do with the spreading of and hyper exposure as a main source of equity and value from the cryptocurrency market. So banks will know that you have exposure to 5 different world currencies and other different types of assets and securities and so on. But if everyone is securing Bitcoin behind the scenes, what does this mean for the actual role of the central bank? The point of the central bank and the central bank is to give economic policies and tell everyone else what the interest rates are and exactly how high things should be within the market. And that's only because they control the actual supply and creation of the money. What happens if everyone begins to buy something? Thousands of banks around the world are beginning to buy fractions of Bitcoin and or an entire Bitcoin, what have you. And at a certain point, we see that Bitcoin actually becomes larger than the actual banking system itself, randomly throwing it out there. What happens to the actual people who create the money? They then lose all of their power. This is part of the reason why Bitcoin is so important, because we see Bitcoin continuously growing in this direction, taking more and more of a market share of the US dollars that are out there. People are taking their US dollars and pushing them into Bitcoin. People are selling off their gold and pushing it into Bitcoin. We're witnessing a revolution right before our eyes, and it seems like only 4 people actually understand what's going on. The Basel Committee comprises central banks and financial authorities from 28 jurisdictions and is a forum for regulatory cooperation on banking supervisory matters. The latest consultation paper is based on the disclosure guidelines and the final prudential standard on how banks should handle their exposure to crypto assets that was released in December of last year. The consultation paper aims to set a standardized disclosure table and set of templates for banks' crypto assets exposures, with the proposed implementation date of the 1st of January 2025. The Basel Committee has opened the proposal for public comment until the end of next year, after which the results will be published on their website. This is going to be I think some of the cryptocurrency space will be following this kind of news. It mainly has to do with, we will probably then get more accurate news as to how much these banks are actually holding. We know, or rather I know, that banks are holding. You should all know as well from the news that we consistently get over and over. It's impossible as a bank or another country or an institution to hear that the US government is holding $5 billion of Bitcoin and you make sure that you have no exposure to it at all. Anyway, the point is, this is going to be quite interesting to see how this actually unravels and unfolds, especially in 2025 for the cryptocurrency market. Yeah, major news, not something that many people will pay attention to, but a lot of people, this is the kind of news that should be at the top of the list of what is being paid attention to, because at some point in a more transparent manner, over the course of the next couple of years, we are going to know exactly who holds how much Bitcoin. And I think a lot of people are going to be really surprised if they found out that we know of 12 countries who are holding Bitcoin, but there are actually 65 who are holding it. And some of the major world banks are also holding Bitcoin as well. Will this have any impact on the retail investors? No, because they don't know what to actually look for when it comes to certain metrics. But it's the same exact way when we first got news that BlackRock was actually in the cryptocurrency market and prices rose. That's from the rich people who understands what it means for an $11 trillion company to be in this $500 billion asset, that is to say, Bitcoin. That's the Basel Committee Bank for International Settlements news. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Also in the news as well, The SEC's 2024 fiscal plan has indicated an increased emphasis on cryptocurrency oh, it's terrible. Emphasis on cryptocurrency regulation, targeting both emerging risks and investor protection as well. The US SEC's commission released its fiscal plan for 2024, detailing a heightened regulatory focus on cryptocurrency and associated financial technology. The report comes from the SEC's Division of Examinations and outlines the agency's approach to emerging market risks. The SEC has gotten to a point where, so they mentioned before that they're not going to release any actual cryptocurrency regulations for the United States for the next, I think, 3 to 5 years. I think that was the generalized time frame. But the SEC has done everything in their power to kind of like push everyone else out of the ring. And they basically control the cryptocurrency market within the United States at this point. They have all the power that they were trying to get. So now they're going to start announcing more things along the lines of what they will be doing and how companies will have to fall in line. This is basically the regulatory standards that a number of companies have been asking for since around 2012. But the regulatory framework for all of these things sets us up for a crypto. How do I phrase it very easily without having to like drag on? Basically, all of this regulation that we're currently seeing right now happening from around the world is more than enough for people, companies and institutions to want to get into the market because it kind of protects them as well. I was listening to something as to why a lot of people prefer a Bitcoin ETF as opposed to actual physical exposure. That is to say, if you have billions of dollars. Is because in a world where these companies are basically newly into the cryptocurrency space, the idea of a $100 million self-exposure to Bitcoin is a bit terrifying for them because they have no idea how to properly custody their coins, what to do with them, where to put them. You can find a company that will do this for you, but you also have to pay them a lot of money, etc. So what institutions are excited about, as you might have seen, is a Bitcoin ETF or anything that is securitized because it actually has to go through the SEC. So should you, in a situation, have $100 million in the form of a security with exposure to Bitcoin, and that company goes belly up, and this way you are more protected in being able to get your money back, the hundreds of millions of dollars that you put into it, as opposed to just actual physical exposure yourself. Someone loses the USB key or destroys the computer, then all your money is kind of gone. Very interesting. Like it's different levels of money that come into play with all of these things. The SEC announced its release that it would be giving special attention to crypto assets, blockchain, and other emerging financial technologies that could potentially pose risks to investors and market integrity. Once again, it has to do with like larger investors. A lot of times we get news that things are for the people, and you have to tilt your head back and you realize, no, it's the people at the top of the ladder, at the top of the pyramid. All that stuff is for them. Yeah, anyway, I think we're gonna like lightly end it here because I keep coughing. I think the air is just very dry in here. I keep trying to like humidify the room. It's not really working. So early in the morning when I do end up making videos, it's just like me making videos in a very dry room the entire time. Anyway, the SEC is releasing more information as to what they plan on doing. I think no one should be surprised that they plan on regulating the cryptocurrency space a lot more, but I'm interested to see into like exactly what that looks like, because as of now, the SEC has made sure to simply, regulation with force is what they've been calling it, where you simply get in trouble for having done something as opposed to being told, hey, you should not do something so that you do not get in trouble. Yeah. So apparently the SEC is going to have increased oversight of the cryptocurrency space around 2024. We'll see exactly what that ends up meaning. Probably nothing for us directly, but more so for larger companies who are going to be getting into the space because of the ETF and all these other kinds of things. Yeah, I do hope that you have all enjoyed. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and or supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.